Welcome to the Kill the Lion podcast. I'm your host, Cody Clarke. We got a great one for you today. We have Dan Lotz here, filmmaker, YouTuber, awesome guy. You're going to love hearing from him. If you like the show, support us at killthelionfilms.com. You're supporting not just the show, but our entire film studio. We make feature-length films. You've probably seen a bunch of them, if not all of them. We want to make more. Support us. $2 per month. It supports the show. It supports the studio. Here is Dan Lotz. Dan, good to talk to you.
Hey, Cody. How's it going, man?
I'm doing great.
I imagine you're doing pretty good. How's the weather over there?
It's getting warmer. Thank the Lord. It's been so cold, man. It's been crazy here.
Yeah, I feel like I've just been locked inside. I feel like now it's time to start getting creative, and now that it's warming up and sort of getting back to the normalcy. I don't know. It feels a little bit more normal now that there's not like 8 piles of snow in front of my car.
Yeah, I can't make movies when it's like super cold. I've learned that by now. I'm more creative in the springtime and the summertime as far as actually shooting stuff. And then for like fall and winter, I'll either be editing stuff or I'll be writing stuff. I know you're starting your new project in the spring, I believe, where you're shooting 12 movies in 12 months. Is that right?
Yes. And as for the cold thing, I agree with you. I'm more creative during the summer. Just want to note that because I feel like that's I thought that was just something I was like, but I think a lot of filmmakers are like that. But yeah, the 12 features in 12 months. So basically, the idea at least is to at least shoot 12 features in 12 months. I don't know if it's going to be 12 features shot in 12 months and released in 12 months. I hope that's the case. We're going to see, but I think that to make that promise might be a little too ballsy.
Yeah, I think just shooting them in 12 months, that's plenty impressive enough. I love that you're starting when it's warmer. I love that because if you were starting in January, I'd be like, man, this boy is not going to do it. He is not going to pull this off.
That's exactly what I thought. And I think another reason is that I needed time to give myself, I needed to take a break from Long Con, which that's what I'm doing right now. And I basically need to just promote that. And I wanted to take a little bit of time to basically refuel and then give myself a couple months to write some new ideas, come up with some new stuff. And my hope is I'm going to put all the easiest features first. There's going to be 2 or 3 that I know are going to be able, I'm going to be able to do them in my sleep. And then hopefully warm up enough that when I do the more complicated features, I'm not so scared. I don't want to do something that's super ambitious the first thing because I feel like then I might just be scared off the whole project.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I think that it's funny because if you talk to me or if you talk to Joel Haver or any of our guys as far as truly independent film, you doing this, we're just yeah, totally, you could do that. But if you talk to quote unquote civilians or people in the industry or whatever, they're going to be like, what are you talking about? Are you talking about short films? Are you talking about and it's no, you can do this. I don't think I could do it if I started in January just because I can't do stuff for 6 months anyway. So it's I might as well just start when I'm at my most creative and able to deliver. And that was that's a poker tell for me as far as the fact that you are going to pull this off by the fact that you're starting so late.
Yeah, and I think that was a choice that I made, and at some point I realized I was because I was if I try to do it by January, I'm going to get 3 features deep and then I'm going to quit. If I do it in summer, there's an actual idea to set up a slate of movies and actually execute each movie. So the first movie will be a documentary on the making of my first 3 films. It's going to be called The Folk Filmmakers, and that's going to be basically the initial one. So what's awesome about that is other than collecting interviews, and then I have basically all the archival footage that I need to make it work already. So that's going to be something I can literally edit and do in my sleep. And all I have to do is just record a couple quick interviews with actors and then people involved with productions.
Well, if you ever need a talking head for that one, I'd love to chime in if possible.
that's what my hope is to get guys like you, Joel Haver, other people, and get them for like the more wider context, and then specifically focusing on the three films we made, but then also trying to recontextualize it within the folk filmmaking movement. And that will be a segment in the documentary itself, is the movement beyond just Dan and Joel Dick.
That's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about folk filmmaking. I feel like everybody has their own terms for it. I know Joel Haver talks about zero budget a lot, or no budget. I use the term truly independent films. You use folk filmmaking. I love that everybody has their own little flavor to what we're describing as far as this new movement in independent film, and the very, very low budget productions that are very impressive and are, not constrained by like, oh, this needs to be like 2 minutes long. This can be like actually a feature instead. Talk to me about how you arrived at folk filmmaking as a concept and as a filmmaker, that you decided to make films this way.
Yeah, so folk filmmaking, when you say like we all use different terms, I think that it's like in history, there was probably different terms for every wave and movement. And I think that at some point there'll be one that will sort of rise to the top that just becomes the most adopted, obviously. So I think the way I came up with folk filmmaking was I was in McDonald's, which is the funniest place to do this, because the most corporate place, basically the opposite of what I wanted to do. Is basically I was with someone I would consider a mentor, and I basically showed him Chlorine, and we were meeting up to watch it, and he's like, "This is like folk filmmaking," and he said that, and it just like hit a spark in my brain that I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is exactly how we describe our films," and I instantly knew this was how we were going to market the films going forward. And it originally was just a plan for just to market my films. And then I was thinking, well, what's more going to attract more people to this? Being something that just I can do, or something that everyone can do? And I thought that's the more interesting way to do it, is to let it be something that everyone has power and control over, that you can be a folk filmmaker, and you don't have to really come up with your own name. You can use this label as something that defines what you do.
Yeah, I think it's a great term, because it does get to the warm quality of your work and a lot of our work. There's something cold, I would say, about so-called legitimate indie film, the kind of, indie in name only. A24 is basically, as big as anything else these days. That kind of filmmaking, there can be great movies made that way. There's no wrong way to make a movie technically, but there's a lack of warmth that I feel like we deliver on in spades.
Yeah, and I think it's the calculation of that. I think it's when you see an indie film that's realistically a Hollywood production, but is using the name indie because it's just become a sexy term that festivals like to throw at you. I think that's where you see the coldness. It's the calculation in it. And I think when you look at works like Chlorine or Sheep Eater or Long Con, you don't see that calculation, or with your works, you don't see that calculation there. It's clearly you're using the term truly independent filmmaking or folk filmmaking because you actually believe that's what you're doing.
Right. And it also, I mean, my first love was music, as far as, doing art and creatively. And definitely, like, when I was in high school, that was the time period. I don't know if you're familiar with these people that I'm going to mention, but like, Adam Green and the Moldy Peaches, and like the anti-folk movement. That was really attractive to me when I was in high school, and that kind of steered the kind of songs I was writing at that time period, which kind of ended up being the songs that I used in my film Strummer. But I have like a positive connotation with folk, and I think a lot of people do as well, where it's just like, man, I can settle into this. This is of the people. This is it just feels like you're not necessarily maybe around a campfire, but around a fireplace. It's just, that's what we're going for with our films vibrationally. And I think you picked up on that really well. And I'm rooting for every single one of the terms. I'm rooting for folk filmmaking. I'm rooting for truly independent film. I'm rooting for any other ones that come around down the pipeline. And I think we'll just see what resonates with people the most. But I think folk filmmaking, it's very persuasive as a word. And so I think it does stand a chance of possibly being, quote unquote, the term when we look back on this period in film.
Yeah, I think that the term conjures in your mind just an image, and I think that's the one thing that I liked about it. And I can't take credit from that because it was my mentor's thing. So I've always tried to say that he was the one who came up with it. I think he's a genius for saying that. But yeah, I think that it just conjures a certain image in your head, and I think people have certain connotations with folk being anti-establishment in some way that I think that you just can't rip away from folk. So I think folk filmmaking gives you a warm feeling, but also gives you an anti-establishment feeling, gives you a feeling of just home-brewed sort of like feel. And I hope whatever term, like I don't really think any of the terms are bad. I think all the terms have their merits, and they all are definitely going to be something that I think is going to be used in the next few years. And whatever ends up in the zeitgeist in the future, we'll see.
I think we should mention that your mentor is Ronald McDonald.
Yeah, Ronald McDonald sat down with me, and then basically he said, "Hey, listen here, kid."
It was the statue of him, right? It was one of those ones where you're like sitting on a bench at McDonald's, and there's a painted Ronald McDonald, an inanimate. Man, I bobbled that joke. It was so good too. An inanimate Ronald McDonald, and his disembodied voice told you about folk filmmaking.
Exactly. That's exactly where it was born. That's why I had to add the little wrinkle of it being at a McDonald's, because it was about Ronald McDonald.
It's so funny that we're talking about McDonald's on this episode, because you haven't heard the first episode yet, but when I was talking to Joel, for some reason, Sprite kept coming up. It just, and I feel like one of the themes of this podcast, because it's still finding itself, these are just the first few episodes. I feel like one of the themes of this podcast is going to be unintentional product placement.
I like it.
So the first episode, it was just very Stripe heavy. Sorry, they're very Sprite heavy for no apparent reason. And then this one, McDonald's, and then,
hopefully we'll continue the traditions for future episodes.
Exactly. Who knows what's happening in episode 3, but I'm sure it's going to be some other, unintentional product placement thing. So tell me about tell the listeners, of course, about your feature films. I've seen them all. I've seen Chlorine. That was the first one I saw. Then I saw Sheep Theater, and then I saw The Long Con. These are all really interesting movies. I'll say right off the bat, these are a treat to look at. You have this boy wonder, Joel Dick. I know you did this. You yourself did the cinematography for Sheep Theater.
Yep,
which looks wonderful as well. Let's tell the listeners about Joel Dick, because you dropped the name a little bit earlier. I don't want people to think you have beef with Joel Haver and you're calling him a dick. I want to be very clear to the listeners at home that Joel Dick is a separate entity. He's a man. That's his name, and he has a great eye for cinematography.
Yeah, I mean, what a better name for the entertainment industry than Joel Dick? Come on, I mean, how much better could you? I mean, it's fantastic.
And any entertainment industry, whether it's porn, whether it's Hollywood, whether it's folk filmmaking. Oh yeah, it's one of those names, man.
We really considered Dick Films to be one of our top names, but 92 Films ended up being the one that worked out. But yeah, Joel's got the secret sauce, man, with the lighting. I mean, obviously, I think anyone who's seen the films, I mean, it's the one thing that none of the trolls can admit is that the cinematography is pretty good. So overall, I think Joel just really kills it with the lighting, and I don't know. I think he tapped into some sort of vein at some point and just really figured out how to light a scene, how to block a scene, and how to make it just work really well. And I think if you look at his body of work, I think he's one of the best cinematographers working right now. That's no one's talking about Joel's work. And I think it's just crazy to think that Joel has made three films. He obviously shot some stuff on Sheep Theater for his parts, and I think some of his parts are the best looking parts in Sheep Theater. Yeah, I don't know. I think Joel just makes really great stuff, and I love working with him. And I think having him as my cinematographer, I think, has really elevated the class and style of the three films I've worked on.
Absolutely. So let's go through your films one by one. Let's start with Chlorine, which a lot of people that was the first thing they saw from you, because that's a film that kind of hit pretty well on YouTube, and that's a bit of an unusual movie where you are playing essentially a hitman, and it has this great, like, almost like, I was a fan of the first season of Mr. Robot. I wasn't really big on it after that. Were you into Mr. Robot?
The first season I watched, and then I never picked up after that.
Well, the thing that I loved about Mr. Robot, it was like just taking this ordinary person and giving them so much power and so much depth, and just a hacker, a loner, suddenly is the central character to the entire world. And I love that Chlorine kind of had this thing where, like, you're this unsuspecting dude, just hanging out by a pool or whatever, but you are this skilled assassin. Talk to me about, like, the genesis of that idea for yourself.
Yeah, I think Chlorine. It was basically I was sitting at my pool, and I had watched this video by Austin McConnell, who's like a pretty big, I guess, indie filmmaker type guy in the YouTube scene. And he was basically like, "Oh, make a project this year," and maybe he kind of implied that he would feature it on his channel. And I remember going to Joel and saying, like, "What if we just made a film? Like, we would just destroy everyone because there'd literally be no one who would even come close." So that was just the general thing. But then for Chlorine specifically, I had been playing around with this idea of this, what I would basically call him like an autistic hitman was basically the idea. And I think I played the character in that way, somewhat autistic intentionally. And I did some research on it and how my mannerisms are and stuff. And I like that idea of having a hitman that couldn't connect with his sister. That basically he was really good, really his inability to really connect with people was what made him such an effective hitman. But ultimately, it was what really let him down as a character, as a person. So that was something that really interested me. And then Chlorine kind of had that moment where it's so weird because we made it as more of a distraction from working on Long Con because we were working on audio, and we were like expecting it to get maybe 500 views. And it's so funny that it hit biggest of the three, and it's basically what I would consider to be one of the seminal kind of films in the folk filmmaking movement, in a sense that it's nearing 50K now in terms of views, and I think that there's not a lot of work in terms of like sort of artsy feature films that are in that realm, at least on YouTube.
It's the best version of something that I notice with movies where people are just starting out making movies and they want to cast their friends, and it's this thing where, like, all right, well, how are we going to reach this, like, believability with the characters? Because you don't want to be limited to just writing things that, like, your friends could specifically obviously play, like a
Yeah.
group of, like, slackers or stoners. That's usually where people go with it. And then you have the other side of the spectrum where people are like, no, my friend is going to be a hitman or a mob guy. And it's like unbelievable. But the great thing about Chlorine is that there's this earnestness to what you're doing that just gets you past that when you're watching it, because it's just so unusual that, like, you just buy these characters because you're just sold this kind of unbelievable, kind of almost fantasy like world, that I think you achieved that really, really well with Chlorine.
And I think there was a lot of intention with I wanted it to be like people that you didn't expect to see in a Hitman movie. I was like, I want every person in this to be not who you're expecting to see. Like, if you opened your eyes, you'd be like, nah, that's not who I'm expecting to see. And I think just by the offbeat weirdness of it, I think it somehow just transcended the tropes of being just a crappy movie with like your friends being in it, and it somehow worked. And I think it's a testament to all the other guys in the cast, and it's a testament to the fact that I somehow didn't flame out, because that was my very first acting performance, basically, in anything other than like a 5-minute short film.
Yeah, you leaned into what you were trying to accomplish with that film. That's something that you do with every single one of your films, is that you're just like, yeah, this is the movie that I am making, and it's going to be consistent in what it is for its entire duration. And, trolls be damned. I made this movie. This is what it is. It's either for you or it's not for you. And here it is for free on YouTube. And I think that energy is so folk, as far as like, one of the great things about folk is that it can be just a guy on stage with an acoustic guitar strumming it as hard or as lightly as they want to be strumming it. It's it's that thing of like, all right, if I want to be aggressive with it, I'll just strum the guitar until my fingers bleed. If I want to be, beautiful with it, I'll pluck the guitar like in a gentle, heavenly way. That's a vibe that I get from your film, as far as like the dynamics of what you're doing, and it has this gentle tone sometimes, and it has this more aggressive tone sometimes, but it always maintains that folk warmth.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it perfectly. I think I could go on, but I feel like you kind of encapsulated exactly what I'm trying to do. At least with Chlorine specifically, I think the warmness, but then also there's the brief aggressive or emotional moments in the film.
So let's talk about where you're shooting these movies. Where in the U.S. have you shot as far as your features? Let's just go down the list.
So all three were. So one was shot in my hometown. Long Con was shot in Plainfield, Illinois. And then there was somewhere up in Zion. There was a beach in Zion and a couple other locations. Sheep Eater was shot in my apartment in Joliet, and then Chlorine was shot all over Joliet, as well as Vegas. We went to Vegas and shot some scenes there.
So primarily, you're a Chicago filmmaker.
Yeah, Chicago, Joliet, Plainfield. I basically frequent all those areas.
Awesome. So, what would you tell somebody who's living in Illinois or something, about like what you can do and do it where you are, as opposed to thinking you need to be in New York or LA or whatever?
Yeah, I think Chicago has one advantage that no other state has, and I think we have a thriving television market that gives people the shittiest fucking roles ever. We have a market of people that are literally, all it is Chicago Med, Chicago PD, all those shows, and you can play a doctor for 3 seconds on screen. So you have a billion actors trying to make it for a role that is really only going to give them maybe 3 lines. So the advantage of being in Illinois is you can have this giant pool of, because it's one of the bigger places for acting, you have this giant pool of actors, but no one is making features out here. Like literally no one is. So if you make a feature, basically any person, you're going to be able to get them for very affordable or completely for free, because they just want to work on something. And so I think that's one advantage that specifically Illinois has, and is one thing I think that has made my feature films possible, is that the acting pool is so rich, but the releasing of content there is so poor that people really want to fight for a good project, something like Chlorine or Long Con or Sheep Eater.
Yeah, that's very important. And I see similar things happening with New York, where, I have access to this pool of talent of people that are just fed up with not getting anything very good out here. And they just want to see that you are going to release it. You have a track record, and they're usually just on board. So you look at a website like Backstage or whatever, and it's a buyer's market, so to speak, as far as if you're trying to get a movie made, and I assume even more so, in the Illinois area. What you also have in Illinois is you have access to stuffed animals.
Yes, I do.
Yes, and we should go there. We should talk about that. You know, you don't always have to hire actors, people. If you're listening at home, you can also use stuffed animals, which you use to great effect in sheep theater. So let's talk about sheep theater.
Yeah, Sheep Theater was a movie I shot basically out of boredom, basically out of depression and loneliness that I felt during the quarantine because Illinois was one of the most, I would say, toughest on the whole quarantine stuff, and my wife was is a respiratory therapist, so she basically works on COVID like 24/7. So basically, every day of my life is like waiting for the shoe to drop, basically. And so there was a certain anxiety and fear I felt. And so Sheep Theater was this almost like fantasy world that I could escape in my mind as to where I could go to express all these feelings. And that's the first half of the film, what happened. And then my wife got pregnant, and then basically we had a miscarriage. And so that miscarriage informed the second half of the film, where the loss and certain things that I filmed and I think it really kind of cemented and finalized and crystallized a lot of the feelings I had while making Sheep Theater. And I think it was all done through these puppets, which I think could have been a huge, mistake. Everyone could have thought I was some like weirdo with these puppets, but I think somehow the childlike wonderment and the sort of dark setting somehow contrasts well enough that people enjoy what's going on with the story.
Yeah, it's a very interesting movie. Obviously, anybody who digs my film Ramekin, you know, they're going to be right at home with something like Sheep Theater. They're used to inanimate objects being mined for horror and cuteness and just everything in between. So if you like Ramekin, you will love Sheep Theater. To anybody listening at home, for sure.
Yeah, I think Sheep Theater has it has a lot of influence from stuff like Ramekin, and I think that there is a legit direct reference to Ramekin in the film.
Yes, there is. Yes, and I appreciate it absolutely.
So that was my little hat tip to Cody on that one.
So Long Con, that's your latest release. I think it's your best work to date, and it's also the film that you ended up working on for the longest time. You know, it was in itself a long con. I remember seeing a comment where somebody's like, "Is the film itself a long con? What is this, some meta thing? Because it's been like a couple years and it hasn't come out yet."
That was always the joke that sustained us. I think was that like the long con. We didn't want it to become the long con. Like we didn't want it to truly become this thing where we worked on forever and then we never finished. And yeah, I think the long con. It's been getting a lot of good reviews so far. I think it's holding at as our most popular so far, but maybe we'll see where things go in the future. But I'm excited to see what people think about it. I think it's the film that I can talk the most about because it has the most to talk about in the film.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers to this one. It feels like your biggest movie, and it also feels like, all right, this is going to be the way in for people that are used to quote unquote bigger independent films. But what I mean by that is just higher budgets, more traditional storytelling as far as like, you know, crime and noir. Like this is the movie that's going to rope people in and make them realize, oh, like this is like you can do stuff with stuffed animals. Like I get that, but like, oh my God, you can do the same thing as much bigger movies, but at a very small budget. What was the budget on Long Con?
Long Con was 3K.
Which is insane. I mean, it easily feels like a $2 million movie.
And realistically, it was more like 2,500. We broke a window. There's a little reference at the end. At the credits, we say sorry for the broken window. We broke one of the windows of the house, and that cost $500. So it was more like 2,500 if you don't count the one mistake that we made there, which was so basically, I mean, for $2,500, we made what I would consider to be like you said, like something that you think could compete with a full Hollywood film. And I think no two films could be more opposite, and I'm glad I released them so close together with Sheep Theater and Long Con, is that Sheep Theater basically says, like, hey, when your back's up against the wall and you have nothing, here's what you can do. And then Long Con is like, hey, you don't need that much resources, but if you have some, this is the results you can get if you spend the time to put something good out.
Yeah, it's a movie where like it's one, known star away from being like indistinguishable from a movie of a enormously higher budget as far as like what people are used to. And so it's going to be this kind of way in for a lot of people. And you have tremendous acting in the movie. Talk about the female lead that you have in this, which you've done work with her before. I'm going to mess up her name, so just talk about her for a little bit.
Yeah, so Anna Dvorak is an actress from, I think, Naperville. And basically, we worked on a little short film called Pull the Trigger, which was basically like a teaser for a feature film we were working on at the time, like we were wanting to work on at the time, but never really got to. We met her on that, and she played a role as like some like just like housewife role. Like basically, she just had to come in and be mad at someone, and we really liked her in that part. But it was such a small and minimal part. We felt we could write better stuff. And so when Long Con came around, we really wanted her to be involved, and she was really excited to. And so we asked her, and she gives a fantastic performance. In my opinion, I think it's one of the breakout performances from the film. Probably in my top two favorite performances of any of my films. Honestly, I think it's really amazing, and I think that she has an immense talent. And obviously, she worked on Chlorine, and I think she had the number one most. We had a screening, and the only compliments they basically said the acting sucked across the board on Chlorine at this place that reviewed it, but everyone said that Anna was fantastic. So we knew we were in the right place, and we felt good going into the fact that Long Con features her for a lot of the film, and the film is basically sort of about her character.
Yeah, she's a tremendous actress. She has this great presence to her. Her eyes are just made for cinema. She has that quality to her, like Ingrid Bergman
Hmm.
type of thing, where it's just like, oh, this is a person who is born to be, on screen in a cinematic capacity. And she has the acting chops to boot. She has it all.
Yeah, I think that everyone in the film really killed it, but I feel like Anna specifically had a hard role to play, and I feel like not many actresses could have done what she did.
Yeah, it's all these movies. I should stress again. These are absolutely for free. You can go on YouTube right after you listen to this episode. You can watch any one of these movies, and you can also watch. He does. Dan does these great interviews with people like myself, like with Joel Haver, like with anybody who's doing anything interesting in film that you can check out on his channel. He does videos where he's talking about making movies or giving people strategies, giving people like ways to come up with ideas for stuff to make. It's kind of like a one-stop shopping. Your YouTube, was that this intentional thing where you wanted to be like this kind of hub? How did it come to be as far as like figuring out what you wanted to do on YouTube?
Yeah, I think it started off as just being a place to put work when we first started, but I think it was around, I don't know, I think 2019, like early 2019. I sort of changed my whole mindset to filmmaking because I knew that the whole festival circuit was really not going to be the place where I was going to get a lot of success. And so I sort of changed my focus to wanting to build my brand around the making of my films rather than just the films themselves. I figured that, the document don't create idea that I think Gary Vee, I know he might be considered a charlatan by many, but I think his idea of documenting and then showing your creation after you've documented it, I think has a lot of merit. And I think it's so much easier to wake up on a Tuesday and upload a video about how you made a movie rather than making a movie every week because you just can't do it. You can't make, a 1 hour film every week. I mean, it's just be impossible. So you have to figure out a way to fill in those 52 weeks, in a year. And so I think that building the hub, building like all the other content around it was definitely a very intentional choice. And I wanted it to be something where if someone like me had the camera, had the cinematographer, had the ambition, but they didn't know really where to go, that they could literally click on 922 Films, binge all the videos, and be like, okay, we're good, we're ready to go. And my hope is with my documentary, The Folk Filmmakers, that will be like my final artistic statement on that, and basically giving you like a 2 to 3 hour documentary that's literally going to give you everything you need in order to just go out and make it yourself. There'll literally be no excuses anymore.
That's awesome. That's something I can relate to definitely as far as wanting to give people no excuses anymore. I'm sick of these excuses, man. I'm sick of these aspiring guys. I hate the word aspiring. Like just do it, man. That was my impulse with my book Kill the Lion. I was like, there's
Which is a
no
good book. Which is a good
yeah,
book, by the way.
very good book. I endorse it as well. I give it 5 stars. He gives it 5 stars.
Hey, my mom bought one. My mom bought me a copy of it, so I have 2 copies actually, because she didn't know I bought one. So I actually have 2 copies. I'm actually thinking about raffling off one on my Patreon to give to one of my fans.
That's a great idea. But yeah, that was my impulse too. I was like, there's no book dedicated to specifically making movies for no budgets in the way that I'm making them. So why don't I put it all in the book so that I don't have to deal with people saying, yeah, you can do it, but what about me? I got to figure it out. And it's like, no, you just got to read the book, watch a couple of my movies, and you have everything you absolutely need. So that's this thing, man. It's like, we have to get rid of these excuses, these hangups. There's too many young, talented, interested in film people out there that get brainwashed by, going to the library and picking up some film books where they're talking about, here's all the lights you're going to need, here's all the crew you're going to need, here's the amount of money you're going to need, like $250,000 just to like all these weird like mythologies of independent filmmaking that are just so obsolete. Like I don't know how many filmmaking books you've perused through, but if you pick up one of these things, you're going to come away with it thinking like, oh man, I can't do this. I can't put this together, especially in this, this COVID era. Like it's never going to happen. But if you go on YouTube, you go to 922 Films, or if you check out Cody Clarke movies or Joel Haver movies, you're going to be, by the end of the day, you're going to be like, oh my God, I can do this. Like this is not a dream. This is my reality. I just have to do it.
And yeah, and that's basically, I think it's like sort of like a rabbit hole. Basically, how many people, I don't know about you, but I basically on a daily basis get like 1 to 3 messages a day basically saying like, hey, your film Chlorine inspired me. I'm going to go make my film now. I'm going to make it, and I think it's almost like that quote about the Velvet Underground. I forget how it goes, but basically only like, 2,000 people listened to the Velvet Underground when it first started, but every one of those 2,000 people went out and made a fucking band. And I think that's exactly what we're doing right now. Is we're not, obviously Joel has a huge channel, so it's a little bit different, but like for the most part, we're not big on the main stage. But every freaking person that's going to watch this stuff, I think, is going to go out and make their own stuff, because I think the raw creativity is addictive.
Yeah, I feel like almost Joel Haver is our like Nirvana. Like he's our Kurt Cobain, and we're like these other awesome grunge bands. And it's like, the folk filmmaking, the truly independent filmmaking, the grunge movement, these are just these like seismic events where like people realize like, oh man, Nirvana rocks, and then they're gonna be like, oh my God, all these Seattle bands rock, and then like it's just this huge wave where like, the way that movies were being made prior to what we're doing, it's kind of like the equivalent of, the big hair metal stuff where it's just like, you look at what these larger indie films are doing and it just seems ridiculous compared to what we're doing. Like what we're doing just seems so much more relevant, much like grunge. And I think we're going to very clearly win. I think it was like one of those things where like it was before Joel hit like so huge, and if you haven't listened to the Joel Haver episode, go back and listen to that. This boy is getting like 4 million views on his short films. He's close to 1 million subscribers on YouTube. This is our little Nirvana boy over here that's breaking out. And before he hit, and we were all just kind of like at the same level, like basically conceiving that we were going to win as far as what we were doing, but we didn't have the proof yet. You look at what he's doing and you see like, oh man, once the reach is out there, the masses are so ready for what we are doing. They just don't know we exist yet. And when they know we exist, man, it's going to be insane.
Yeah, I think totally. And I think that you're only one or two big shout outs, big collaborations, big connections away from it going off. I mean, think about all the great artists from like the Hollywood New Wave. I mean, they were all like the schmucks of the industry until they were running basically the jail. And I think that folk filmmaking will do that, but in a more ethical and more honest way. And I think hopefully at some point, I think in the next, 5, maybe 10 years, I think you're going to see us, you, me, and other guys in the folk filmmaking movement making what I consider to be bigger stuff and probably more successful stuff and stuff that is actually getting mainstream appeal from audiences.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm firmly of the idea that like the masses are way smarter and way hipper than what they are exposed to. I think the commercial idea of we need to give them like Fast and the Furious 29 and that's all they deserve because that's all they can stomach. That's this very like condescending approach that Hollywood takes.
It's like a regressive idea that the only thing that people want is like Marvel, the newest Marvel film or the newest DC film or whatever.
Yeah, it's so funny because like it's funny that like guys like us we get the reputation of like, oh, they're just pretentious, with their little art films or whatever. But really that's the attitude of these major studios. It's not our attitude at all. We're of the people. We understand that the movies we make are weird, but we believe that everybody out there is just as weird as us and can get what we're doing. And it's these big studio execs that think that the masses are just these cattle that all they can eat is this crap that they shove into them. And I think that like one of the great things that will come out of what we're doing is a a connection between the people and the truly independent folk filmmaker, no budget, whatever guys. We are them, and we will be embraced by them, and we are already being embraced by them, and we don't need to analyze it any further than that. It's a direct connection between the artist and the people.
Yeah, and I think that you're going to see the consciousness of the average American, average anyone in the world, I guess, their taste is going to just broaden because of what's going to be coming out. I mean, a film like The Long Con is it's just weird. I mean, it's just a weird movie, and I think that once people get that, kind of taste of something weird, I think that people will start to crave that, and I think that will be the thing that sort of fuels and motivates the rise of folk or truly independent filmmaking.
Yeah, absolutely. All our stuff, I mean, every one of our movies, they're pretty weird, but we're banking on weird being more accessible than the suits think it is. We're gonna close out this show with a segment that I came up with when I was doing the Joel Haver episode. It came about very organically, and I decided that it should be a part of the show. It's just a little icebreaker type thing that just kind of decompresses us towards the end of the thing, and that is stupid questions. Okay, I'm gonna ask you some stupid questions, and then we're gonna get out of here. They'll just be quick. You can give yes or no answers. You can give short answers. You can do whatever you want.
Sounds good, man.
All right, let's. I'm gonna rack my brain. Think of a good stupid question for you right now. All right, so your last name is Lotz, right?
Yes.
What's that all about?
I think it's a name it's like a name that basically means like dog.
It means dog? I thought it meant like a lot of stuff.
I think it means dog in German. I think Lotz means dog. So basically, my name is Daniel Dog, which sounds dope.
That's a great name. That's like if you're like a hip hop like old school like guy or whatever. That's a great name, Daniel Dog.
Yeah, I like it.
That sounds like something that would exist, man.
Yeah, now I'm gonna go trademark that.
Yeah, you need to do like a kids show on YouTube where you're Daniel Dog and like you have like a dog helmet.
Maybe that'll be the next film in the Sheep Theater universe, Daniel Dog.
I love that I said helmet. I meant to say mask, but for some reason I said you need to be in a dog helmet, which I feel like that's unique enough that like, oh man.
It must exist somewhere.
Yeah. All right, I think that first question went so well that we should just only do that one. I know you're pressed for time as well. Very quickly, where can people find you? I think we talked about 922 Films, but are you active anywhere else? If people want to check out your stuff and reach out to you or whatever, where can they find you?
Yeah, so people can find me at 92 Films at YouTube. You can also type in $5 Film School for Patreon. My Twitter is Dan DAN _ Lotz, all capitalized. And I usually am on Twitter beefing with other filmmakers and talking about fun stuff. And I think that's probably where you get the most wholesome and me reactions to things. But yeah, those are the places I usually frequent the most.
Awesome. Dan, thank you for being on the show. Great to have you.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you all for listening. Once again, if you like the show, if you like the studio, KillTheLineFilms.com, $2 per month. Support us today. Thank you.